Did you know that while you're celebrating your national team's goals at the World Cup, there's an accounting department inside every major European club watching the tournament very, very closely? Because FIFA has just put the biggest figure in history on the table to pay clubs for lending out their players. And depending on how far each national team goes, some clubs could pocket several $million from this program alone. We're talking about the 2026 World Cup, the first one with 48 teams, the longest World Cup in history with 39 days of competition, and also the most expensive one ever for FIFA when it comes to compensating clubs. The total figure is $355 million. And before you think, okay, but that money goes to the national teams. No, that money goes straight into the pockets of the clubs. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, PSG, and the rest. So why does FIFA pay the clubs? This is my favorite part, because this is pure economic incentive dressed up as generosity. When a club releases its star player for the World Cup, that player is gone for a full month. He's exposed to injuries, and the club is left without one of its most valuable assets right before the next season begins. So FIFA, to keep clubs from getting in the way, pays them compensation. It is literally the price world soccer puts on borrowing Mbappe or Lamine Yamal for a month. This figure of $355 million represents an increase of almost 70% compared with Qatar 2022, when $209 million were distributed. And here comes the first interesting twist. For the first time ever, this money is not paid only for the final tournament. Clubs are also getting paid for qualifying matches. And that is going to be key to understanding one of the most curious cases today. The distribution is divided into two main blocks. $100 million will go to clubs that released players during the entire qualifying phase, calculated across the 905 qualifying matches played around the world, at a rate of roughly $2,360 per player per match. The other $250 million will be distributed among clubs with players in the final tournament, calculated per player and per day of participation, with a guaranteed minimum of $5,000 per player per day, although some estimates suggest it could reach up to $11,000 per day, depending on how the full fund is ultimately distributed. And this brings us to today's main point. We're going to go club by club, and at the end of each one, I'll give you an estimate of how much that club could generate depending on how far its players go. Group stage elimination, round of 16 or quarterfinals or semifinals and final. And believe me, the numbers are much bigger than you might imagine. Let's start with the club that has set the all-time record, Manchester City. Pep Guardiola has 19 players called up for the 2026 World Cup, the highest number any club has ever had in World Cup history. And the diversity is insane. Erling Haaland with Norway, Rodri with Spain, Ruben Dias, Bernardo Silva, and Mateus Nunes with Portugal, Gvardiol and Kovacic with Croatia, Jeremy Doku with Belgium, Ryan Cherki with France, Nathan Ake and Tijani Reinders with the Netherlands, and even players from Algeria, Egypt, Ghana, and Uzbekistan. Let's do the math. If we take City's 19 players and assume they all get knocked out in the group stage, we're talking about roughly 14 days of camp per player. That's between $1 million and almost $3 million for the club, just from that first phase. If a significant number of those national teams advance to the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, the figure could get close to $4 million. And if, in the most extreme scenario, several of those teams reach the semifinals or the final, City could be looking at a figure around or even above $8 million, just from this FIFA program, just for lending out players. And do you know what the most ironic part of all this is? While City is getting paid for releasing these players, it is also the club taking on the highest injury risk, because 19 players competing in maximum intensity matches in the middle of the summer is a nightmare for any medical staff. Right behind them comes Bayern Munich, with 17 call-ups. Here, Germany is obviously the biggest contributor, with no fewer than 6 players: Neuer, Kimmich, Tah, Goretzka, Musiala, and Pavlovic. But Bayern also has representation from Colombia with Luis Diaz, France with Upamecano, and Olise, England with Harry Kane. Canada with Alphonso Davies, South Korea with Kim Min-jae, and even Senegal with Nicholas Jackson. With 17 players, Bayern's numbers are almost as brutal as City's, between $1 million and $2.5 million if most of them fall in the group stage, rising to around $4 million if several teams reach the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, and potentially approaching $7 million if Germany, with its 6 Bayern players, has a strong World Cup and goes deep. Tied for third place, with 16 players each, are PSG and Arsenal. And interestingly, they are also the 2 finalists from the most recent Champions League. PSG, the reigning European champion, spreads its 16 players across 9 different national teams. France, obviously, contributes the most, with a truly elite 5-man group. Ousmane Dembele, the current Ballon d'Or winner, alongside Bradley Barcola, Desire Doué, Warren Zaire-Emery, and Lucas Hernandez. Portugal adds Vitinha, Nuno Mendes, João Neves, and Goncalo Ramos, all 4 of them European champions with PSG itself. Then you have Marquinhos with Brazil, Achraf Hakimi with Morocco, Fabian Ruiz with Spain, Willian Pacho with Ecuador, Lee Kang-in with South Korea, and Ibrahim Mbaye with Senegal. And here's a detail that I personally find fascinating from an incentives point of view. Dembele had some muscle issues just weeks before the tournament, and for a while his World Cup participation was in doubt. Imagine what that would have meant for PSG, losing in one blow the most decisive player in its French group, precisely the one who could generate the most loan days if France goes far. Luckily for the Parisian club's balance sheet, Dembele recovered in time and made the final squad. Doing the math with PSG's 16 players, if most of them stay in the group stage, we're talking about between $1 million and $2.5 million. If several teams advance, especially France and Portugal with their respective blocks, the figure rises to around $3.5 million. And if France, with Mbappé, Dembele, and company, reaches the semi-finals or the final again, as it did in the last 2 editions, PSG could be looking at close to $7 million. Arsenal, for its part, also has 16 players, and here, England is the national team that contributes the most, with 4: Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, Noni Madueke, and Eberechi Eze. But the international spread is huge. Gabriel Magalhaes and Gabriel Martinelli with Brazil, William Saliba with France, Martin Odegaard with Norway, Victor Gyökeres with Sweden, Leandro Trossard with Belgium, Jurriën Timber with the Netherlands, Piero Hincapi with Ecuador, Kai Havertz with Germany, and David Raya, Mikel Merino, and Martin Zubimendi with Spain. With those same 16 players, Arsenal's numbers are practically identical to PSG's, between $1 million and $2.5 million in the group stage, up to $3.5 million in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, and around $7 million if England, with its Gunners Corps, has a historic World Cup and makes it all the way to the end. Just behind them comes Barcelona, with 15 players called up, the club's highest number ever after the 17 it had in Qatar 2022. And the curious thing here is that the national team with the most Barca players is not Brazil or France, it's Spain. 8 Barcelona players are in La Roja's squad: Lamine Yamal, Pedri, Joan Garcia, Eric Garcia, Dani Olmo, Gavi, Pau Cubarsí, and Ferran Torres. The rest are spread across the Netherlands with Frenkie de Jong, Brazil with Rafinha, France with Jules Koundé, Uruguay with Ronald Araujo, Portugal with João Cancelo, England with Marcus Rashford, and even Egypt with Hamza Abdelkarim. With 15 players, if most of them stay in the group stage, Barca would be looking at between $1 million and $2,300,000. If Spain and the other national teams advance to the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, the figure rises to around $3.5 million. But here comes the real what if. If Spain, with its 8 Barcelona players, reaches the semifinals or wins the World Cup on the home soil of its great continental rival, Barcelona could get close to $6.5 million. Just from this one source. Just for having 8 players on the favorite host national team. Now, not every big club is in the same position, and this is where the system gets truly interesting. because it reveals something very powerful about how power is distributed in world soccer. Think about Real Madrid. The Spanish giant is sending 10 players to the World Cup, a strong number, but still well below City's record. Here the standout names are Mbappe and Tchouaméni with France, Bellingham with England, Rudiger with Germany, Courtois with Belgium, Vinicius with Brazil, Valverde with Uruguay, Brahim Diaz with Morocco, Arda Güler with Turkey, and David Alaba with Austria. Notice anything strange about that list? Not a single Spanish player. Real Madrid, the most decorated club in history, does not have a single representative on the host national team of its own country. With 10 players, Real Madrid's numbers are noticeably lower than those of its usual rivals, between $700,000 and $1.5 million in the group stage, up to $2,300,000 in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, and a maximum of roughly $4,300,000 if France or Brazil, led by Mbappe or Vinicius, makes it all the way. A significant amount, yes, but far below what City, Bayern, or PSG could be handling, simply because Real Madrid has far fewer players called up. And this is where the question that really matters comes in, at least from an incentives point of view. If France, with Mbappe and Tchouaméni, goes far in the tournament, Real Madrid gets paid. If Brazil, with Vinicius, advances, Real Madrid gets paid. The more different national teams you have represented, and the further they go, the more diversified your World Cup revenue portfolio becomes. Now let's move to Atletico Madrid, which has a story that is much more interesting than it may seem at first glance. Atleti has 12 players, spread across 5 national teams. Argentina's backbone travels almost as a block with the reigning world champion, Juan Musso, Julian Alvarez, Nicolas Gonzalez, Thiago Almada, Giuliano Simeone, and Nahuel Molina. That's 6 Atletico players inside Argentina's squad. Spain takes another 3, Marc Pubil, Marcos Llorente, and Alex Baena. Uruguay has Jose Maria Jimenez. Mexico has called up young Obed Vargas. And Norway, one of the tournament's surprise stories, after returning to a World Cup for the first time in 28 years, has Alexander Sorloth as one of its attacking leaders alongside Holland. With 12 players, Atleti would be looking at between $840,000 and $1,850,000 if most of them fall in the group stage. If they advance to the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, the figure rises to around $2,800,000. And if Argentina, with its 6 red and white players, defends its title all the way to the semifinals or final, Atletico could be around $5 million. Almost half of that figure would depend, literally, on how well Scaloni does with 6 of Simeone's players. And now comes the stat that really shows how twisted this system is. This time, we're not talking about Atleti, we're talking about Milan. AC Milan has 10 players called up, with names like Christian Pulisic with the United States, Rafael Leao with Portugal, Luka Modric with Croatia, Mike Maignan and Adrien Rabiot with France, Connie de Winter, and Alexis Selemakers with Belgium, Pervis Estupinan with Ecuador, Ardon Yashari with Switzerland, and Santiago Gimenez with Mexico. 10 players in 10 different national teams. It may be the club with the most extreme geographic spread in the entire tournament. Not a single national team contributes more than 1 player. With 10 players so widely distributed, Milan's numbers are similar to Real Madrid's, between $700,000 and $1.5 million in the group stage, up to $2,300,000 in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, and a maximum of around $4,300,000 if one of those 10 national teams, say France or Portugal, reaches the final. But here comes the contrast. Remember that Italy has not qualified for this World Cup for the 3rd consecutive time. That means the Italian backbone of Milan itself does not generate a single dollar through its own senior national team, because that national team simply does not exist in this tournament. Milan has 10 players at the World Cup, but it could have had several more if Italy had been there. That absence, for an Italian club, is not just a matter of pride. It is literally money left on the table. To me, this proves that the system does not necessarily reward the best clubs in the world. It rewards the clubs whose players belong to national teams that qualify and then go the furthest. And that depends on factors completely outside the club's control. the form of a national team coach, the group stage draw, a last-minute injury, or the bad luck of having your country compete in a confederation with stronger rivals. And to close, a mention for Liverpool, which has 11 players called up across almost 9 different national teams. The Dutch block stands out, with Virgil van Dijk, Ryan Gravenberch, and Cody Gakpo. The French presence with Ibrahima Konate, Mohamed Salah leading Egypt, Alexis McAllister with reigning world champion Argentina, Alisson with Brazil, Andy Robertson with Scotland, Florian Wirtz with Germany, Wataru Endo with Japan, and Alexander Isak with Sweden. With 11 players, Liverpool would be looking at between $770,000 and $1,700,000 in the group stage, up to $2.5 million in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals, and a maximum of around $4,700,000 if one of those 9 national teams, whether the Netherlands, France, or Argentina, reaches the semifinals or the final. It is a figure that, spread across so many different countries, almost guarantees Liverpool will be generating revenue throughout the entire month of competition, no matter what happens. And this is the central idea I want you to take away from all of this. This system creates an incentive that is both perverse and fascinating. On one hand, clubs want their players to go to the World Cup because it means direct income, potentially several $million. But on the other hand, every match those players play at the World Cup is a match with injury risk, physical wear and tear, and accumulated fatigue before the next season even begins. Clubs have been complaining about this for years, and FIFA, instead of changing the calendar, has chosen the most capitalist solution possible: pay them more. The longer your player lasts in the tournament, the more the club earns, but also the more risk it takes that he comes back broken before preseason. So the next time you see your favorite player celebrating a goal with his national team, remember that somewhere in an office in Munich, London, Madrid, or Paris, someone is watching that same game with a calculator in hand, figuring out exactly how much every extra minute of competition is worth. Let me know in the comments which club you think will make the most money from this World Cup. See you next time.